Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has touched down in Washington and will meet with President Biden today to make an appeal to senators and House Speakers Mike Johnson to congregate support for more aid to Ukraine as the country continues its fight in a war against Russia. Unity News Net wrote on X, Zelensky meets the only people with a smile still on their faces over the Ukraine war, the U.S. weapons manufacturers. Let's listen to what words he had for them.
I want to thank you, all of you and your partners, and of course, please pass from me messages to your workers, people who really work, and they did a lot for Ukraine. Just as we are facing to this war, as unprovoked war, and we understand that without such people, companies, and such workers, and we really couldn't manage and save our land.
An incredible use of aspirational music to underscore a plea to the defense industry to give you more money without any articulation of how it's in, one, Americans' interest, or two, in the long-term interest of Ukraine, given that, of course, it's in the middle of a battle, hopefully more toward the end of a battle with a nuclear power that America will not commit, I hope, will not commit to engaging directly. Now,
what's the what's the strategy? What's the plan? Why is it that this time this level of aid is going to make a difference in turning the war in Ukraine's direction? Like, what is the long-term plan? They clearly don't have one. And now we know, so we've read reports from U.S. intelligence officials who knew from the beginning that this was going to be a rough task in the first place to prevent Russia from taking these regions of Ukraine, that they want to be a part of Russia, that this was always going to be a fraught goal. The Ukrainian generals disagreed with U.S. strategy repeatedly and did their own thing. It might not have mattered at all, but here we are. We are in a place where this war does not seem winnable. It seems like it could go on. It seems like we could keep giving them money and they could keep putting up resistance and people could keep dying on both sides of the conflict. Or we can admit that, frankly, the Ukraine's existence as a country, as a people, even Zelensky's government are not actually at risk here, from everything we can tell, that this is a territorial dispute about part of Ukraine. This is not a march across Europe. This is not the beginnings of World War III, unless we choose to make it the beginnings of World War III, which is not, taking agency or action away from Russia. Russia should not have done this. Vladimir Putin is an autocrat. If something could be done about that without severe consequences, that we would, but it's just not reality. It's just not reality. The reality is he's going to remain in power, and we have to contend with him.
I think the tragedy is misleading Ukraine in a way that caused it to avoid diplomatic resolution earlier in a way that could have saved a lot of lost lives and lost infrastructure and lost everything in the country. If you're going to end up at the exact same place today that you could have ended up 2 years ago when there was a deal on the table that was thwarted by the U.S. and the UK, then you cannot look at the generous aid that the U.S. has been giving to Ukraine as aid. It feels like a blood money payoff to throw Ukrainian bodies in an American problem, which is weakening Russia, instead of coming to the solution that many people in Ukraine, including ethnic Russians, would have preferred, which is a diplomatic negotiation. Now, we should remember that Congress, from a Reuters story today, has approved more than $110 billion for Ukraine since Russia's invasion in February of 2022. $110 billion for Ukraine, but notably no new funds since Republicans took over the House from Democrats in January. That is a pretty significant and notable shift. And for those Democrats who say that foreign policy doesn't drive politics, and who would say that no one is really interested in stopping aid to Ukraine, that we're all united behind Ukraine, that this is not going to be a political sore spot for Joe Biden in the general election, should play close attention to that clear black and white difference that people are seeing in terms of money going out the door if a Republican controls the House versus if Democrats control the House. It's hard to argue with those numbers.
Yeah, Republicans made this a big priority. It was clear that conservatives felt differently from conservative voters, and frankly, probably a lot of independent voters and left voters as well, that there was a constituency for a different policy on Ukraine than what the elites in both parties, really a lot of marching in lockstep on the Democratic side, with a small number of Congress members who felt differently, but, who got shamed into rescinding that letter. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Mildly asking, what's the strategy? Is this going to go on forever? Is this really a good idea? And they got, they got attacked by Democrats for that, by other Democrats. On the Republican side, the interventionist voices have kind of risen up and forced the party to contend with that, even though Mitch McConnell hates it. He's all for giving as much funding to Ukraine for as long as possible, but he has to contend with a lot of people in the House and the Senate side who don't feel that way.
Yeah, let's take a look at a pitch from GIDDY Vance and how the spending priorities of the country are being framed by some of these more, I don't want to call them isolationists because that's a negative non-interventionist Republicans. Let's take a look.
You have people in this town saying we need to cut Social Security. There are people who would cut Social Security, throw our grandparents into poverty. Why? So that one of Zelensky's ministers can buy a bigger yacht? Kiss my ass, Steve. It's not happening.
Now, GIDDY Vance is someone who, in an earlier time in his life, did support those kinds of reforms, cuts to Social Security, but so did a number of Democrats, including Joe Biden. So that's neither here nor there. The point of the matter is that today he's making a pitch that sounds very compelling to the average American ear. Yeah,
and I saw him getting in a lot of fighting on social media with Nikki Haley supporters over this. Look, obviously, I do support reducing government spending, but you have to be across the board on it, and I absolutely think it's a losing issue to do that. And it's doubly losing if you say you want to cut the benefits Americans are getting and give more benefits to people overseas, is the most losing position of all, which is the position, unfortunately, many Republican elites and people like Nikki Haley find themselves in when they talk fiscal, policies that I support on the domestic for getting our house in order, not overspending, that kind of thing. But then that goes out the window when we talk about defense, the defense budget. It's never enough. It's whatever the government needs, and it's totally inconsistent. And people, Americans, feel that dissonance, and it makes them, I think, not trust that Republicans have any kind of standards when it comes to. The Republicans complain about the debt, they complain about government spending, then they take over and they don't do a thing about it. It's the quintessential boy who cried wolf issue. You're saying this is existential, the amount of debt we have, that it's unsustainable, that it's at the root of so many of our economic problems, and then you do nothing to, not only do you do nothing to fix it, you make it worse by overspending on defense.
Yeah, and it should not go unremarked upon how the audience that was sought out, the defense industry, is exactly the only community that is really thriving and flourishing as a consequence of this ongoing conflict. As we reported over the summer, that defense stocks flourished after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There's been additional reporting about how politicians' profit is soaring. This is from Newsweek, as military stocks soar since the Hamas-Israel conflict started. And again, the real winners in these equations are the defense industry and the politicians, who for some reason are still allowed to trade and profit from their stocks.
More Rising right after this.